all of these families and the people, like, I have never forgotten you. So if they think a reporter just, is in and out the door, not the case at all. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Outlet Podcast, where we tell the truth about TV news. No BS.
I'm not saying once you listen to someone, they're going to change your mind or you're going to agree with them, but at least have some respect of their opinion, and you'll walk away with an understanding of where they're coming from. And that's where I think we could all learn that today.
The president met with congressional leaders. Doctors will start implanting the devices. And you heard that warning from the Coast Guard tonight. For now, we're live in Orlando. For now, we're live in Dallas. We're live in Boston tonight. Caitlin McCulley, 7 News 19.
I'm Caitlin McCulley. I left my job as a TV news reporter in a pandemic to try to find a better way to share stories that matter, no BS. Thanks for listening to Outlet Podcast. You can download new episodes each week.
Today, we talk with Christine Dobbyn. She's a veteran TV journalist who has been in the industry for more than 15 years, traveling the world. But it may surprise you what she's most proud of during her time in TV news and what she'll remember the most. In this wide-ranging conversation, she reflects on her career, the highs, the lows, everything in between. And she shares some real insights about listening and the license to be curious. Here's Christine Dobbyn. Well, welcome to Outlet.
Well, thank you.
You're my inaugural interview here.
Oh, no pressure.
No. But I'm so glad that you joined us, and I know a lot of people are excited to hear from you.
So I'll try to give the short version. I had this hunger to get into reporting at a really young age, probably 12. I know my parents say I talked about it at a young age. They thought it was just a phase, and it was not. It was definitely, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do all through high school. I loved to write. I loved creative writing class. I liked English. I liked history, politics. I loved to talk, loved to interview and interact with people. And so I felt like it was definitely the right career path for me to go on. And I really feel like I've been a journalist since I was about 16. I started working on the school newspaper as a lot of journalists do, worked on the school yearbook, and then got my first job in radio at 18 in our hometown, at one of our hometown radio stations. So that's where it all started. Went on to college and studied journalism, got an internship, and I've worked now at 3 stations. The first, Evansville, Indiana, the ABC station, WEHT, and then it was on to WBNS TV, the CBS in Columbus, Ohio, and most recently where I spent the greatest part of my career, the ABC-owned station here in Houston.
Yeah. And so a lot of people who aren't familiar with the industry, they'll ask us, well, why are you moving around so much? Why don't you just find a spot and stay there? Or like, I mean, it's kind of lonely, this hopping around from market to market.
It is, without question. And I knew that going into it. You always have the people who discourage you. Are you sure you really want to do that? And you have to move to a small town to get your start. I was pretty fortunate. The station that I interned at actually hired me, was my first reporting job. So while it was not at all what I wanted to do, but you do what you need to do to make your dreams come true. And I moved back in with my parents after college, and the station was an hour away, but it enabled me to get that start. And so many of my friends in the business, they went into serious debt because as you know, you don't make very good money in the beginning.
What was your first job? What did you make your first job?
I think $18,000 a year. And that was actually, I kind of gradually worked my way into it. So initially I wasn't even at that. I was a production assistant, and then I was kind of like a part-time reporter, and I would come in, on my off time, and anytime they needed someone to even go out and get a VOSOT with a photographer, I would run out and do that, and then gradually just prove myself to the news director. And I remember my dad, he has always helped me with my taxes and finances. And at the very beginning, he was doing my taxes, and he said, you're eligible for government subsidies. I mean, that's how the pay is. And I don't think it's really changed a lot since then, but it's a labor of love. It's all about how much you love the job and how badly you want to do it. And I always tell students today, if you really want to do it, just stay on the path and the money will come. You just have to be patient. So it is difficult when some of your other friends graduating from college are making 3-4 times what you're making, and it takes a while to get there.
Mm-hmm. And you got there. I mean, by
Yes.
all accounts. I mean, you were at the ABC affiliate in Houston for 15 years. Is that right?
15, yeah, almost
14?
15. Yeah.
And while you were there, I mean, you've covered all kinds of things. And I remember your going away video, and you posted, I mean, interviews with presidents, traveling to other countries. I mean, you had some amazing experiences.
Absolutely. I look back at that, and sometimes when I look at my resume and that video, I think, "Oh my gosh, did I really get to do all of that?" And that was the goal all along. And while I consider myself a hard news journalist, I love a good feature and I love to have a good time and experiences. So I played basketball with the Harlem Globetrotters. I took ballroom dance lessons it wasn't really, I didn't really compete. It was an exhibition that I was at a competition and we did a dance. I have ridden in, helicopters with the Coast Guard, been out with the Civil Air Patrol, been on training missions with the military, just so many things, and traveled the world as well for the royal wedding, the Gulf oil spill. I've been to Cuba twice, Guantanamo Bay, covered the Pope in Cuba as well as in New York. There are stories behind every story. And that's why I'm working on a book, because there are just so many things that the public doesn't see. They see the story, of course, but they have no idea the craziness that went on maybe behind the scenes or before or after the story. So when we were covering the beatification of Pope John Paul II, and this was right after the royal wedding. So the photographer and I, we had been in London, and then we went straight to Rome to cover the beatification. It just happened that they were close together. So I think that's why the station decided to just keep us over there. And I always ask people, do you remember where you were the minute you heard Osama bin Laden had been killed? And most people maybe don't. Some people would. But I said, I will never forget it. So it was our last day in Rome. And of course, the time difference is 6-7 hours. So it was 4 o'clock in the morning Rome time and 10 p.m. Houston time. We were waiting to do a live shot on the ceremony. And I'm standing on a rooftop overlooking the Vatican. And we were up there with a couple other stations. And I hear Gina Graff, Gina Graff from our from the satellite center at the station. And I hear her say, I don't remember exactly how she said it. It was like, hey guys, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if ABC News is reporting that Osama bin Laden has been killed, and just hang tight here where everything's crazy right now. And we're just standing there. And I remember looking at my phone and I was like, oh my gosh, like I will just never forget it. And then, you instantly want to know what happened and what all is going on. And so long story short, they never did come to us, because obviously ABC cut in and it was all about that coverage. And here's the funny thing is, when you're on these trips, they're wonderful experiences, and you do get to see the area as you're working, but there's not much free time. I mean, even if you do have free time, you usually want to sleep or eat, because you're not getting a lot of that either. And so we had been, double stories, and we were tired, but that next day we were going to finish our last story, and we were going to have a few hours that we were going to go see the Coliseum or do a little sightseeing. And as you would know, that news story, just that, squashed that plan immediately. And so it was 4 a.m. and the station called and said, okay, we want you to go get world reaction to go someplace in Rome and get world reaction. And so we immediately, talked to some people about where would we want to go. And someone said, you might try, it's basically Italy's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I'm not going to try and remember exactly the place that it's called, but they said, you'll find people from around the world there. And so we went there, and we didn't know what the rules were. So we were just going to play dumb, because of course, any place in Washington, DC, the press rules are very strict. So we just kind of stood back on the sidewalk. And of course, we're looking for English speakers as well. And I just sort of talked to people as they went by. I was like, have you heard the news? Osama bin Laden has been killed. And so I knew if they understood what I said, they spoke English. And a couple people walked by and they kind of blew me off. And then they stopped in their tracks once they realized what I had said. And they turned to me and they were like, what did you just say? And, at that point, I thought everybody would have known through social media, but it was truly even in today's, world, I think when people are traveling, maybe they're not paying attention. So we literally delivered the news to a lot of tourists in Italy about this, and they were talking to us. So it was a crazy event, just one of those things, a story I'll never ever forget. In London, in our workspace, there were a couple times that we had, I would voice the package and the photographer would start to edit, and I would look and I'd be like, oh, I have like, 45 minutes. And I seriously put chairs together and I was sleeping in, we were in this, it was like a kind of a church fellowship hall. That was the workspace ABC had. And I put chairs together and my headphones on. I'm like sleeping there, like just and there's other people milling around doing things. I'm sure they're like, who is this person? But you just do whatever you have to do, wherever you are, whether it's a hurricane or a world event, you find those little moments that you can sustain yourself to keep going.
When were you the most proud of your work?
So obviously these big events that we've just talked about are amazing and witnessing history. But I really think the stories I'm most proud of are usually something that was local and helping, like seeing the impact journalism can have on an individual person or an individual family or a whole community. And one that comes to mind, I had done a good bit of work with a certain attorney in town who gave me a lot of story ideas from time to time. And I remember one time he called me and there was a couple he was representing, and the man worked for a company. The woman, his wife, was, I believe, a beautician or hairstylist. So she was on his insurance and she had terminal cancer. And there was some kind of issue with the insurance company, and his company was going to pull some of the benefits. So she couldn't get this treatment that was saving her life, or they thought would save her life or prolong her life. I should say prolong her life. So we worked on a story, and through talking with him and the couple and the company and the insurance company, and within a few days, we were able to change the trajectory of her treatment and get her back to, I think she was going to MD Anderson, probably get her back to that treatment. And she lived 2 to 3 years after that. And after she did eventually pass, but her husband and the attorney wrote me a note years later and said, your story helped prolong her life. Like, I get choked up about it. And I wish we could have, prolonged her life even longer, but just, giving a voice to people. That's really what it's all about. And sometimes just a few phone calls and the, the opportunity that a company has, or an insurance company, and they know that someone is questioning them about this and holding them accountable, and that can make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. I think I feel the same way with stories, that you're able to see the impact that you have, because sometimes we cover things, and especially now, you cover a story, then you leave it and you move on to the next thing the next day. And so being able to see that impact, even if it is one person, one family, can really make a difference, I think, for journalists.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I will say, I don't think stations have, and I say stations because our experience is TV, but journalism in general, but there needs to be more follow-up on stories. And I know sometimes that's a hard pitch or sell to management, but when I've talked to people on the street, they would often ask me, whatever happened to this or whatever happened to that? And I feel like follow-up stories can be some of your greatest, I guess what they call watermark moments for a station, following that story through all the way to the end and just making it your own. And I think that can separate you as a news outlet. But sometimes it is a tough sell. But I think the public, sometimes they do want to know whatever happened to that, because, it kind of just falls off a cliff and you never know. You don't know how the story ended,
Mm-hmm. And you also bring up a point about journalists as humans, and the fact that we go out to these scenes, a lot of them tragic, sometimes at the worst moment in people's lives, and we're there to do our job. And it's difficult because you don't want to come across as insensitive, and at the same time, if the story's happening to a particular person, a particular family, you want to give them the opportunity to be a part of their own story. But at the same time, I mean, these are difficult moments for people. How did you manage that? And How did it affect you?
I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts of being a reporter, and maybe something that isn't talked about enough is just the trauma that you witness, and it's the emotional toll that people are dealing with, whenever you're covering something. And I think over the course of my career, I learned how to navigate each situation. And I think early on in your career, you're trying to please, please managers. Not that I always tried to please the managers, but early in my career that, you're just so concerned about, well, they said to do this. And then as time went on, I became more and more comfortable with being who I am. And I have a certain set of morals and values that I am not going to compromise, no matter what that means for my career or job. And so I think I got more bold as time went on in just, being able to say, no, I'm not doing that because of X, Y, Z. And there usually was a reason why. It was just being sensitive and knowing, when that family first found out, um, if you are right there, like you've got to be incredibly delicate with the situation, and you still have to be delicate a few days later, but you understand their process. And sometimes, they would come back 2 to 3 days later and say, okay, we do feel like we want to share our story.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of my reporting mentors, Penny Moore from WBNS TV in Columbus, Ohio, just amazing storyteller. And I know she talked about how sometimes people are amazed that victims or victims' families talk to the media. And she said, but no one wants their loved one's, death or injury or situation to not be remembered or documented or be important. And that's why people share stories, even if it's difficult for them. Otherwise, they might just be, a name in the story. But if you give us a picture and you tell us about your loved one, now the rest of the world knows how amazing they were to your family and what they meant to your family or to an organization or a company or whatever their affiliation is. So I think that's why people want that to be known. And I also think today people are more media savvy, and they watch enough media to know, oh, the media is probably going to come and ask for an interview. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a little more comfort with that. But I will say, for some reporters, they talk about getting more quote callous or jaded. These are words I've heard. Cynical. These are all words we've heard from
Hardened. Yeah.
Yes, hardened reporters as they go through their career. And for me, I've said it was just the opposite. I think for me, it was just a matter of maturing in my own way. And not that I wasn't sensitive when I was 23 years old. I just think I was so caught up in the job and getting the job done that I don't know that I paused to think so much about, some of the situations we were dealing with. And then as I've matured and you just recognize and realize the value of life more and appreciate it more, I found myself struggling more in dealing with these situations and seeing the tragedy. And I remember one situation specifically, it was probably the last 2 to 3 years when I was working, and we were at a boy had been hit on a bicycle in one of the suburbs. And we pull up, we set up, this younger guy came running up to me, and he recognized I was a reporter, and he was like, Miss, do you know anything? Do you know anything? Can you tell me anything? My brother's missing from our apartment. His bike is missing. We think that could be him. And I'm just, my heart is breaking for him. And I said, I'm really sorry. I said, we're waiting for information from police. All we know is a boy was hit on a bicycle. That's all I know. And then it wasn't long before he ran over to the crime tape, and you couldn't really see much because it was around a corner. And then his mother came out a few minutes later. The police, and it's weird. I've described this as almost watching a silent movie because I've seen it so many times where like the family comes up to the crime tape, the police come up, and you're over here, with the media. So you don't know what's being said, but you can only imagine. And then you see the family members. I mean, the mother collapsed to the ground in grief and tears and screaming. And then I looked at the young man who had initially come up to me. And, those are just the moments that are so jarring. And, over time, you just kind of think, gosh, I don't know how to deal with this anymore. And so it became increasingly difficult. But I think the one thing, and I don't know if every reporter would say this, but if I could say something to every person and family I've ever interviewed, I would say, I'm going to get choked up.
It's okay.
You have no idea how much I've thought about each and every one of you over the years. Like, you know, I don't just like do the story and like, and forget it. Like there are, in some moments for whatever reason, like you just remember more vividly than others, but like all of these families and the people, like I have never forgotten you. So if they think a reporter just, is in and out the door, not the case at all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely have similar experiences with things that I've covered when, you know, you get to a scene and you see a little kid's scooter or bicycle, or God forbid like a stroller, and yeah, it's tough.
The situation with the boy on the bicycle, I actually turned to my photographer and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I mean, my chest just hurt. I was just full of I just felt terrible for this family and watching it all unfold. And I actually had a strange, sort of towards the end, I kind of had some strange feelings or emotions, but I would start to get anxiety when we pulled up to a scene and I would see police lights. Like there was an effect on me. But I think what I tried to figure out when I started feeling like I think I need to do something else, but it caught me off guard and it took me by surprise because I had loved the work so much, even though, there are difficult days and situations. And so trying to navigate that and understand where it was coming from was really difficult, but I had to just listen to myself and feelings and emotions. And I was like, okay, this is just me, being encouraged to go in a different direction. And so some of those feelings, got stronger as time went on, but it certainly wasn't a light switch, something that happened overnight. I mean, it took me probably 3 to 4 years from the first time I started thinking, maybe I don't want to do this my whole life, to actually making a plan, moving forward with the plan. I mean, it was a process, and I feel like I'm still in that process.
When you went into this career, did you ever think that you would be doing something else?
No, not at all. I thought I would be, I mean, it's all I ever wanted to do. And I think that's why when I say I was caught off guard, it was like, well, I don't know what to do now, because this is what I always wanted to do. But I feel like I need to redirect, my creativity, my writing, my just my work and energy. And I wasn't sure what that looked like exactly. And so I explored a lot of different things, for a lot of journalists that, they go into the PR communications realm. And I was just trying to figure out what that looks like. And in the meantime, I had been reading a lot of business books. I had done a little bit of stock market investing, and I found this curiosity about business. And I decided, I think I need to explore this. And I have an older sister and her husband who had both gotten their MBAs, and I had watched them go through the process. And they were always talking a lot about business, and business. It's such a broad topic. And so I decided that I wanted to explore that. And so I started my MBA at Rice Business in the fall of 2018 and finished just this last May. And it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And the first year I was reporting and taking a full load in the executive MBA program. So it's definitely one of the toughest things that I've done, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
What do you think journalism and entrepreneurship have in common?
So when I was thinking about business, and I kept thinking, and entrepreneurship is one of the things that interests me. I've started my own digital media company, and then I'm also working on another startup. And I kept thinking, like, what is this? Like, where is this coming from? And it took me a while, but I decided that both are a license to be curious. If you have journalism and if you have entrepreneurship, they're this license to be curious. And I'm an incredibly curious person. You give me a topic and all of a sudden I dive into it a little bit, and then I want to know everything about it. And so that's the commonality. And as I've gone down this road with working on a couple of startup ideas and businesses, and I realized that the process and the path is very much like journalism when you're trying to put a story together and you're like peeling back the onion. And, so many times we would be assigned something at, 9 or 9:30 in the morning. And you're like, I know nothing about that. I don't even have a contact that's related to that topic. And somehow by the end of the day, you're kind of an expert on it. You've peeled back the onion, you found 3 people to talk to about it. You know something about it. You're able to put a story together or 2 or 3 versions of a story together on it. And I found the same thing with entrepreneurship. The other startup I'm working on really has nothing to do with anything I've ever been involved with in my life. But I'm looking, I'm looking for the answers. And I've talked to so many people. And in general, most people want to help you, even if they don't know you. If you call and just say, hey, this is what I'm doing, I'm looking for expertise in this. So it's sort of this, it's not a straight line at all, but it's this path that before you know it, you're like, how did I even get connected to this person? And you look back and, 3 or 4 phone calls or emails have led you on this journey to find out information about, well, how would I do this? How would I go about this? And it's funny because we put a team together at Rice for the Rice Business Plan competition with one of our ideas. It was all new territory for me. I didn't have any Excel experience, accounting, finance, very, very, very new. So it was a great experience, but I was the pitch person on, the front person. And one of the judges who was asking questions of us, she said, well, your team has no experience in real estate, in operations, logistics. Even though we were a team of executive MBAs with a good bit of work experience and life experience. And I said to her, and I was trying to come across confident and I hope I didn't come across arrogant, but I said, I'm a former reporter. I know where to go to get answers. And I don't think it came across very well. I don't think it came across very well, but it's true because you have this ability. You're very resourceful, and because I've done stories about everything under the sun, and especially if now that I'm in the same city where I was a reporter, I have this network of people. So I know how to get the answers and become informed, on a particular topic. So it's a skill. Not to mention just having the guts to pick up the phone or make the call, send the email. Not everybody has that, but we were kind of forced into it on a daily basis. So it comes second nature to us.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, because I thought it was really good. You said most people want to help you. In general, most people want to help you. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
So I can honestly say this startup that we're working on, I think one person pretty much said, I don't really have time. But I mean, I've talked to some people who are very successful, have their own companies. I've talked to venture capitalists. Business owners, CEOs. I mean, they've talked to me on the phone. I've met with them. They've emailed me. It's amazing. So people in general want to help. And every now and then you'll find someone who doesn't, but if you just make the effort and make that call, and I'll go back to when I was first starting in journalism, there is a longtime CNN anchor, David Goodnow. He's since retired, but he was on CNN for years. He's from my hometown. And when I was first trying to get my first job, just on a whim, I reached out to him because he's from my hometown. I thought he'll never call back. Oh my gosh, we've kept in touch my whole career. He called me back and he's coached me and he's looked at my reels and given me advice. And even when I was talking about leaving the business, I even reached out to him and I was like, I can't believe I'm thinking about leaving, news. And he's been a great resource. So you just never know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned I'm working on a book, and it's actually maybe, sorry, an unexpected take on my experiences. And it actually dives into the good that I saw on such a broad scale, despite the terrible things that happen. And I do think maybe sometimes that doesn't get picked up enough or resonate enough on stories. And a lot of the time you're trying to get the facts out on what happened, and maybe you're focused on the trauma and the grief. And every now and then you might see something, but there are silver linings. And sometimes you see people rise to the occasion and do things you would never expect. And I can think of several times, and I don't know if you had this experience, several times during a court case when the victim's family would come out and publicly say they forgive the defendant. And that is such a strong and powerful thing to do, to be able to do. And a lot of that was sometimes reported and recorded because they would hold a news conference, but just always amazed at, at sometimes the way people react and behave and reach across.
And even aside from stories that are connected to grief and tragedy, there's a lot of good going on. There's a lot of exciting things going on, a lot of positive stories. And that's what I hear from a lot of people. I'm sure you have too, is why is the news so negative, or why don't you cover the good? And it's a complicated thing to answer, I think. I'm curious to see how you would answer that.
So that is a complicated question. And I've heard people say that. And then I say, well, I think they've tried that. They've had like all good news stations and they didn't survive. I think you have to have a balance. But I remember, I think it was a professor in college who said this to me, and I can't remember who it was exactly, but it sticks out. And he said, the news is supposed to be the exception. It's news because something exceptional happened. And he said, in a weird way, when most of that is bad, that's actually good. Like if someone lent someone $5 and that's a news, then we're in a real sad state of the world. If that's something that's so incredible and exceptional, that's a news story. And so I don't know if I'm articulating that exactly the way he said it, but I found that fascinating. I was like, well, it's true. These terrible things are the exception. We hope they continue to be the exception, not the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why these are extraordinary things. And most of the time, it's something bad is what's extraordinary. Maybe we've come to expect people to do good a little too much, but I do think there are extraordinary acts of goodness, and those should be recognized and those should be reported. But he, that's kind of what he pointed out. And I remember, this was years ago. There was a day in Houston. We marked some kind of event where I think we had fewer murders than, like murders were way down, or there was some kind of murder rate and that was a news story because the murder rate was down. So that's an exception where something was reported kind of on the flip side.
Mm-hmm.
But he just talked about, how many planes take off successfully at the airport every day. And we don't cover that. When there's a crash, of course, that's the exception. So when he said that, I've always thought about that. And I was like, I think that's right. When you really think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think that in doing so, even though that we are covering the exceptions, do you think it gives kind of a false perception of reality sometimes, or it could, because that's all we're covering, or that's the majority of what we're covering is the exception?
No, I do think that. I think that people see so much negative, and it's easy to think that that's the only thing that's out there. Whether you see kidnapped children or drunk drivers, or there's so many things. And when you really look and examine the stats, your chances of a lot of these things happening to your loved one are pretty slim. But no, I think it can definitely have a bias towards us and make us think the world is just a terrible place. And there's still a lot of really good things, happening in the world. But I think that the negative sells more than the positive. And so at the end of the day, the viewers and, consumers dictate that on some level on what is being consumed, or what's a popular news story. And now that can, of course, be all measured instantly with digital clicks.
Right. Well, and I remember hearing that, people say they want to see more positive stories, and maybe they do, but that's not what they're clicking on online. And those aren't the stories that are going viral. I mean, some of them do now, you see some social media accounts that are just good news or things like that. And I think it does well on that platform, on social media. I think that's a great place to share positive stories. But you're right, in our business model, that is local TV news in particular, I think it's difficult to justify, for managers to justify, leading with a feature story that's happy when the data shows them that's not what is going to keep people's attention. And you need people's attention on the screen for commercials, to sell ads. That's how media companies stay afloat. So I think with that business model, it does kind of present a challenge when you're trying to, if you wanted to include more positive news or happy stories.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you think we go from here? That's an even bigger question.
That's a good
So what's the answer to
question.
everything, Christine? How do you solve our industry?
I think one thing is, when people, I say viewers, listeners, readers, whatever the format is, I think they have to demand more, and they have to speak with, what we were just talking about, speak with what they click on. And if you want quality, then don't click on something that isn't quality. But I also think that, viewers could share their opinions more often about what they want to see, what they would like to see. I think it will be really interesting to see how things unfold as we move forward. But I think, we're already seeing some independent news organizations that are, doing more hardcore investigative journalism, that kind of thing. And I also think that it's been, I think it's been proven from whether it's Netflix or Hulu or even YouTube, and not that all those have news content, but those are longer formats. And even on YouTube, it's my understanding that that at even my last station, they were pushing longer form content on YouTube, because when people went to YouTube, they were willing to watch a 3, 4, 5 minute story. So, maybe it depends on the platform and where you put that that content that is either more in depth or more journalistic, or just longer in length. So I think that now everything is so fragmented and people have a lot more choices. So that I think people just have to speak with where they go, where they go to get their news. And then at some point it will naturally reflect that, because you've got to have readers, viewers, or listeners to have any kind of
financing,
revenue.
That's interesting.
Like that. Yeah.
Do you see yourself going in that direction at all, experimenting with longer form storytelling? I mean, I know you already kind of are with the companies you're working with, but going back to journalism in a way?
So I haven't, that's definitely not off the table. I've always had a real interest in documentaries, and I've done 2 30-minute shows that actually were, I think, some of my best work, and won several awards. So I really do have an interest in that. It's tough from a business model and getting the funding for that. And so I think that could be something later in life that I go back to. And then right now I'm really working with several clients on more brand journalism. And it's interesting because I kind of took that leap, not fully knowing, what I was getting into, but it's a great time to be in something like this. There's so many platforms and outlets, and even you doing this podcast, just the ability you have and the platforms that are available to you. And so when I looked at brand journalism, I thought, well, I don't know, is there really going to be any good storytelling, with businesses? And I'm finding there are amazing stories to tell with businesses. I mean, your goal is different, your audience is different. It's very, very different, but that storytelling is still there. And for example, I am working with a company that has specialty infusion products, and a lot of their employees have children or loved ones with hemophilia. So we've been focusing on stories with them and how they've dealt with it, and how their experiences are able to help them work with customers just because they've been through it.
You're still taking a lot of everything you learned with you, just using it in a different way.
Right, right. Well, and I think anytime something ends, whether it's your choice or not, and whether, um, I think that there's always a difficult emotions involved with it. In fact, I think they kind of say that. I mean, change always brings on a little bit of grief, no matter what kind of change it is in your life, and just moving on from one chapter to the next. So it is, it is difficult, even though, what's the saying? Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened,
Right.
that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it was such a big part of my life. And I have heard people say, you don't choose journalism, it chooses you. And it's a calling. I do believe it's a calling, because I don't believe it's for everyone. And that's the only way I can explain why, at a young age, I really wanted to do it. I believe for that chapter of my life, that was what I was supposed to do. And I
Mhm.
hope I made an impact in some way. And that actually might be the biggest challenge moving forward, is you do feel such a sense of purpose being a reporter and making a difference in the world. That's why I think a lot of people are drawn to it, even for all the criticism, that the media gets right now. But you really, I do believe most reporters at heart, like they want to make a difference, they want to have purpose, and that's how they're able to do that. And so for me right now, I think that's my challenge, is finding, maybe the purpose in, as I navigate the next, few things that I'm going to do. And that just evolves for anyone, I think, throughout life, and especially anyone who's gone through career changes.
Yeah. And, you know, I've talked to other people who are making the same change, and myself making this change too. There comes a point when you're clear that you need to move on and learn and grow.
I think anyone who makes that change, you have to kind of find where you fit. But I think of the person that it's made me today, and the experiences that I got from it, and the skills that you gain that are incredibly transferable. And one thing that I've thought a lot about, and I particularly think about it right now, because our country is so divided. And I'm not going to get into politics or anything, but I do feel like one of the things you learn as a journalist is how to listen. And I don't think there's enough of that going on in the world today. And when I wrote my, sort of end of reporting email and Facebook post, one of the things I said was, if you sit down across from someone who may be very different from you in so many ways, but you look them in the eye and you listen, and I mean really, really listen to what they're saying, you would be amazed at how much better you understand their pain, their plight, or their position. And as a reporter, we had to do that. We had to listen. And I think a lot of people, they don't listen to learn, they listen to respond. And this is not a political newscast or political podcast, so I'm not here to talk politics, but I do think that a lot of the strife our country is going through right now is a result of no one really listening to one another. And I think that's something that I learned to do as a reporter. Active listening is incredibly important. And I think a lot of people, they listen to respond. They don't listen to learn. They're just, the whole time, they're not listening to the person. They're thinking about, well, what am I going to say next? How am I going to interrupt them, or what's my comeback going to be? And as a reporter, you have to listen. It's your job to listen. So many times I came away from a situation with just things that I never expected, just even on a personal level. I mean, of course, professionally, we were always striving to have a balanced story and be fair, present both sides. But, of course, you're affected personally. And so sometimes I would go home at night and reflect upon a conversation that I had or an interview that I had. And I learned things. And there were many times that, you would jump in the news car and you're assigned a story, and you probably have some preconceived notions or bias of your own personal that you're putting to the side for the story, but they are there. And you might even think, well, why would they say that? Or why are they thinking that? Or why did they do that? And then I would, I would do the interview and I would meet this person and I would learn about all of these things. And I'm not saying once you listen to someone, they're going to change your mind or you're going to agree with them, but at least have some respect of their opinion, and you'll walk away with an understanding of where they're coming from. And that's where I think we could all learn that today. Just understand they have had a different life experience than you. Their background is different, where they grew up, how they grew up, or, well, we've all had various situations that shape our feelings, our thoughts, our beliefs. And when you sit and listen to them and have this dialogue and you're open to hearing something and considering other ideas, you can walk away with this understanding is the word, I think. And it's really an amazing and powerful thing. And there were many days I walked away from from a story, wow, wow, what I thought it was at the beginning of the day, and then by the end of the day, just from a personal level, I was amazed, and it just opened my eyes to what active listening and the power of it, and how it could help all of us, I think, in our daily lives.
And that goes back to what you said at the beginning, a license to be curious. Um, Being curious requires listening and learning and understanding, hopefully, as a result of that. But I think you're right. That's something we could all take away from journalists training.
Absolutely. And I think that's something in any job that can benefit anyone, and particularly if you're a manager. I think being an active listener and really listening to your employees, their ideas, their situations. I think it's this skill. It's considered a soft skill in business school, but I think it's an incredibly valuable skill to have. And when I was in business school, a lot of my classmates, would talk to me about, I come from a completely different world than they did. And they would say, wow, there really is a lot of value in a lot of those journalism skills and how you can use them in different fields and industries.
Mm-hmm. What are you listening to or learning right now?
So right now I am trying to learn a little bit more about digital marketing. We have, of course, our storytelling background that we can utilize with brand journalism and projects for businesses. But as far as the analytics of digital marketing and how to use them to help a company, better convey their message, that's what I'm doing right now. So I do a variety of things, books. I have a couple friends who are very good at this. So I'm talking with them. And then I listen to a lot of webinars and different things. And I found going back to school mid-career, at first it's a real challenge because while we learned every day reporting, the classroom is, of course, very different. And I'm in that mode still. And so I'm trying to continue on that learning journey and check off some things on my list that I feel like I need to learn or have some better knowledge of in order to move forward in my current career.
All right. Always learning.
Always learning. I think you never should stop learning, and you just never know where life is going to take you. Don't underestimate, the power of active listening, the power of curiosity, and a lot of other things that journalists have to offer.
All right, Christine, thank you so much.
Thank you.